Hello, Joy Brooks with Email and Coffee. If you've ever watched the science channel Secrets of the Underground or What on Earth, you'll be familiar with my guest. Filmmaker, biologist, author, husband, and father, Rob Nelson, aka Untamed Science, aka StoneAgeMan, shares his passion for all things that wiggle, waggle, sneak, snack, walk, talk, and even decompose. Join us as we explore natural habitats, ecosystems, behavior, and poison ivy. And now, Rob Nelson. Hey everyone, Joy Brooks, Email and Coffee. I'm so excited today. I'm talking with Rob Nelson, who is fan favorite. Let's know a little bit about you, Rob.
Okay. I guess I'll just give a brief overview of what I do. My name's Rob Nelson. I'm a biologist originally, and then I've done a lot of work in communicating science to different audiences. I've worked on TV. I had a show called Secrets of the Underground. I also worked for Discovery and Nat Geo. I did about 25 shows total, everywhere from working in Chernobyl to doing snakes in for Discovery Channel. I right now have specialized in doing short form stuff on the internet, and so I have my own YouTube channel called StoneAgeMan, where I'm really exploring our ancestral evolution from being Stone Age man creatures and figuring out what are the keys that we can take from Stone Age man and bring into our modern life. So I do a lot of ethnobotany now, mixed into the biology background that I have, and I just explore it in a YouTube platform, which is what I've done almost my entire life. And I just enjoy telling stories. So that's the gist of Rob Nelson, I guess.
That's a big gist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's weird because you talked about seeing me on Secrets of the Underground first. Well, I'm a biologist originally. And on Secrets of the Underground, I was telling the story of often finding treasure, which is not all that related to biology, and I didn't highlight my biology background as much because they were the people in the TV editing room were not wanting to do that. But I do have quite a background in biology, and that's always my real interest. So it's quite broad what I do, but mostly I'm trying to tell really interesting stories that allow people to learn efficiently and quickly and have fun while doing it.
Mm. Did you do Driftless?
Yep. We actually, was it behind me? Yeah. No, this is another good. I carry a couple Emmys from a show that we did called Mysteries of the Driftless, and then after that, Decoding the Driftless, and we're working on a third one.
Oh, you are? Wow. Cool.
Yeah. So, that was a PBS documentary that we did, and it was actually crowdfunded. So we had local people in the Driftless area, which is between Minneapolis and Madison, Wisconsin, and maybe almost down to Chicago. Get together and decide that they wanted their area, a story told about the area to help them protect the land. And we went in and did it, and it was a huge success. Pretty much, I would say 80 to 90% of the people in the Driftless have seen that. And I only say that because, well, one, I know it was seen by hundreds of thousands of people at film festivals by the person we were working with, but also when we travel through now, people recognize us. It's the only place I'm like actually a little bit famous is in that small part of the country.
Driftless is glaciers. Did it or did? What's the?
So yeah, so we might as well just talk about that because it is an interesting story that I spent almost a decade doing. Drift is what glaciers leave behind as they plow through with a mile of ice over the top of them. So they crush everything and they just leave a bunch of boulders and pebbles and rocks and debris. Well, we were in an area that was more or less called, just by biologists, the driftless zone. And we thought that was a really catchy name. So we said, okay, we're going to make this documentary about the driftless. In other words, it's an area that, unlike Iowa and Illinois, that you picture in your head with just flat cornfields, it has a lot of topography. So if you go up the Mississippi near La Crosse, Wisconsin, you see these big bluffs and cliffs. Well, all of that is because the glaciers didn't have a mile of ice crushing them. So there's caves there, there's cliffs for peregrine falcons, there's unique Pleistocene fauna that are found really nowhere else in the world. It's just a pocket that was saved because it wasn't crushed. So they call the area the Driftless, and now everyone calls it the Driftless. So if you're in that area, you'll know the name. But it's partly because of the documentary we made about it.
It's, I'm always interested in that kind of stuff. And whenever I'm in an area, I always try to imagine something about it. And I live in New York and I live on Long Island. And I always look at Long Island. I look out and I'm like, what would this place have looked like when the Native Americans were here? Like when it was just one huge tree, high grass. I mean, from swamp to little rolling hills on North Shore. It must have been pretty amazing.
Well, I can tell you there were no buildings, not large buildings. But this is something I've found fascinating in the work that I've done with these documentaries, because I have a unique ability, different than even average scientists who specialize on one particular thing. I've been able to talk to different scientists practically every week for 2 decades. And because we've dived into a lot of archaeological stories, I talk to a lot of archaeologists, and we look at cave paintings, and I kind of piece things together. I have been very surprised at what I found the areas in North America probably look like before Europeans came.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was surprised by is I kind of assumed everything was untouched until Europeans came. That was just the idea in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Native Americans, I mean, it would have been less concrete and steel, but there were a lot of Native Americans in North America at the time the Europeans came, and they used fire to manage the landscape. So a lot of the Northeast is a little bit different because it was wetter, but much of the South, much of the West, they burned it every year. So it was regularly burned for them to hunt in better, and it changed the way the habitats look. And we don't like burning things these days because it's smoky and people think that that's bad for their health, which, to some degree it is, but you can burn in a way that doesn't, breathe it in. So we now need to probably, if we want to restore ecosystems to pre-Columbian times, we need to burn a lot more. That was one thing I learned, and I'm fascinated by that idea.
Well, they didn't create the character Prometheus for no reason at all. And the fact that he gave fire to man, there's something in that.
Oh, sure. Well, and I also think that in our modern age, we forget that we are the fire species. Like no other species uses fire to cook with, to manipulate anything with. We often don't use fire on a day-to-day basis. We just hit the microwave button or we put it in the oven. We're not like making fires. But fire is what really allowed us to become human. Is the way I see it. Talking to archaeologists and then diving into this StoneAgeMan YouTube channel that I have now. I mean, that is the defining feature for humans.
So, StoneAgeMan also fascinates me. I mean, Fred Flintstone aside, or maybe Fred Flintstone. It's just, first of all, I don't even know the year to place it, and it keeps going further and further back.
You mean when we came out of the
When we were StoneAgeMan, when we were, and was it more like a Pangaea? Was it Africa, or was it connected?
Yeah, well, I can't fully address all of those things because it does keep changing, and some of what I learned keeps moving around. Yeah. But once we started using tools that were made out of metal, that was when we got out of the Stone Age. But what that means is that we were a hunter-gatherer culture for the most part. There's still people on the planet today that are hunter-gatherers that replicate what our Stone-Aged ancestors, me being European descent, probably did on a day-to-day basis. So, I mean, Europeans hit it earlier than most people, got out of the Stone Age. But, so I'm developing 6 key tenets of how to live a healthy and happy life, mm-hmm. which is using our understanding of Stone Age man as the basis, right? And I can go into those things, but that is one of the things I'm developing right now. And I just think because I'm a biologist, I always look at everything from a biological basis. And what I've found is that so many people are struggling with anxiety and depression, and it really makes me sad. And even though I would love to study fish, which I studied in grad school, I'm really focusing now on how can I help my fellow humans around me live better. Well, because so much of the work that I've done started in zoos and aquariums and in research labs, what you do is you look at the animal, whatever species it is, a gorilla or a fish, and you say, well, how can I replicate this tank environment or this zoo environment to replicate what that animal had in the wild? Because clearly that will probably be the healthiest thing for that animal. And if you were studying gorillas, you go back to Africa. What plants did it eat? How large was the social group? What were the dynamics that they had? Well, can we put that back into this habitat? Well, for humans, it's just so different than how we evolved. Because I think you've got to go back to hunter-gatherers, what I'm calling Stone Age man, but and figure out what are the things we're now missing, but we can choose. Right? Like obviously we were in small communities and we had to interact with people all the time. We had a sense of purpose because we had to eat, and that was survival. Now you almost don't have to think. You just order food on Amazon. It shows up at your door. There's like, where's the purpose? We were definitely eating different, less carbohydrates and refined foods. We were in nature all the time. We definitely were exercising more. And what I found fascinating is that every indigenous group I've ever worked with had a strong spiritual connection to the earth. And a lot of people have just decided to throw a spiritual connection to anything out the door. And so that's the final piece. But I'm developing all of these things and kind of slowly working with experts to try to figure out what they know about it so I can develop the ideas a little bit further.
Yeah, we do all of these connections. We try to, put names on getting back to nature, keto diets, all
Right.
these things we're trying these
Sure.
things out. And they're just words for a lot of the things that are just basic to humankind. And,
They are.
I mean, I will, I connect much more with things than I do with people.
Okay.
And it's
Yeah.
not necessarily a good thing, but it's true.
Well, I do too.
I mean, I
I'm
will,
trying to get better at it.
yeah, I'm much better with animals than I am with my friends. I'm kinder to my animals. Well, maybe not. I find birds fascinating, just fascinating. Because I
Love it.
look at them and I'm like, they used to be dinosaurs, for goodness sakes.
Oh, yeah.
They shrunk down quite a bit, didn't they? And I just can imagine these big, huge birds without wings, perhaps, or maybe, I don't know. I am fascinated by bugs, but there are a few that freak me out. So cockroaches give me the willies. Just freak me out, cockroaches. Scorpions, not fond of scorpions. Not fond of fleas, not fond of ticks. That's pretty much it.
Well, see, all of this comes back to the Stone Age man approach that I was talking about. There's a reason you would not like all those insects is because they can cause you harm.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really believe we have a natural instinct to stay away from spiders, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I think,
I
and
respect
honestly, any
spiders.
bugs in your dwelling, right? Like if you were living in a little cave, you definitely don't want fleas and insects and roaches. I mean, that means disease is at hand. I think that's a natural response. Definitely to spiders, and I think also to snakes. We have a natural, evolved apprehension to being near that.
Whenever I think of vacations, I always like, oh, I'll think I'll go to, I don't know, South Carolina. Oh no, snakes. Oh no, I don't want to go there. How about Montana? No snakes. Well, depends on where you go in Montana.
Yeah. Well, so my view on all of that is it's 100% an evolved trait. But the more you know, the more you can unlearn what is a potential ingrained trait in yourself. So I wrote a book, and I'm just going to throw this out there as a plug because I have it right next to my desk. I wrote a book called Mother Nature is Not Trying to Kill You, and it really is focused on exactly what you're just talking about there. While we might not want all snakes in our bed with us, most snakes are not going to be a problem. And so you can, like my mother, she will never get past her fear of snakes. totally fine. I understand it, and I actually put a scientific understanding on it, and I say, well, I'll just attribute it to our evolution. That's probably why. It's nothing else. But I've learned that the more you understand individual snakes and the more you spend time with snakes, the more you realize, well, there's a few you got to be a little bit careful of, because they have evolved systems to try to defend themselves and attack prey, and as long as you don't mimic those, you're not going to get bitten, right? So if you just start to learn a little bit about it, they're less scary. Now, I will say, I still jump if a snake is under my feet in the night, in the middle of the night, and I'm walking through the forest and it just comes out of nowhere. I don't like that. But generally, I'm totally okay if I see a snake going across the trail. I'll run up to it and quickly identify what it is, and if it's a kind snake, I'll pick it up and I'll show everyone that it's not a dangerous one. Or I'll give it a little berth if it's a big rattlesnake or something else like that.
I've petted a few snakes, and they're pretty wild. It's pretty interesting. It's very interesting texture, and I'm not talking about like a pocketbook. And their eyes, it's their eyes. It's like when you look at a cow, you're like, oh wow, a cow, it's so cute. You want to come home with me? They're so expressive. You look at a snake's eyes, and you're like, what is this creature thinking?
Yeah, well, we are trained to look at eyes. I definitely believe that. And humans have very expressive eyes, and snake eyes are not that.
Oh, they're just wild. It's like they're tripping. Are they tripping? Are they on acid? What is going on in that brain? Because their eyes are they're alien eyes. They're I look at a dog's eyes and I often wonder, what are they seeing? And different dogs have different eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some dogs have cow eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and some dogs don't. I mean, I've got a husky with blue eyes. I'm thinking to myself, okay, she looks like the devil. And I've got another dog with big brown cow eyes. I'm like, oh, she's so sweet. It's probably the opposite. It's probably the brown-eyed one that's probably thinking, how can I trip her the next time she's going outside? But in any case, it's fascinating for me to meet as if they're human. Meet different animals, horses, cows. They're just fascinating. They're fascinating.
So
And
we did, just as a fun little side note, we did a pitch for a show. I guess we started it about 13 years ago. It sounds like a long time ago. It was more or less trying to understand animal communication. I think we called it Dr. Doolittle something or other, because it made a lot of sense. We had a very small baby at the time. He's now 13. So this is how I know how old it was. We pitched the show to Animal Planet. And what we were going to do is go around to all of the different animals and try to talk to them, try to learn the language that they use to interact with others of their species. And we started off doing pigs. And you may have heard pigs are extremely intelligent, very smart. We learned basic pig language, and you can actually communicate. Well, it's really hard on your voice, but you can communicate to other pigs. Oh, I'm friendly. Oh, there's somebody to be careful of. Oh, hey, I'm telling you to get out of the way because I'm coming in. So you can get down on all fours with a bunch of pigs, which is somewhat dangerous. I wouldn't necessarily recommend unless you had some people around you.
Especially the ones with big horns.
Yeah. And so, and every set of animals has a basic way that they can communicate with others of their species. They might not be using the complex language that we're using, and we may not be able to understand fully how other animals communicate, especially ones that use senses that we don't use. Obviously we listen and we have a vocal box and we're talking back and forth to these to ourselves. Other animals use infrared light and sound waves and ultrasonic, thump beating. But yeah, so I learned a lot through developing that series, and I really wish we could have done it. That would have been my dream series.
Yeah, that would have been pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
They're not fish, they're mammals, but the whales and the dolphins of the ocean are pretty, they're just crazy.
Oh, yeah. Incredible. I actually heard recently that whales can have names for other whales.
I'm sure.
Isn't that crazy? So, they do it through their echolocation over several miles. They can say, "Oh, John found a patch of sardines." They can say stuff like that, or like, "Oh, really? John did?" Because they have different names for individuals. It's so cool.
There's just so much out there that every single day I realize I'll walk outside and, I'll be in the garden. I love dirt. Ever since I was a kid. If it's mud, I'm in it. I'm in the garden and I'm digging, and I turn around and there's a huge ant pile. And I'm thinking, did I just upset them? And what type of ants are they? Because ants can be nasty, very nasty.
Right.
I'm like, maybe I'll just get up. Maybe I'll just move around and let them settle down. They could be pretty social and pretty nasty.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I haven't done a ton of work on ants, but they're definitely one of the species that I have a lot of respect for, because there's definitely more ants in the world than there are humans in the world. By many more orders of magnitude.
And last year, I don't remember exactly. I know there's another beetle, but last year it was some sort of a beetle. When it spread its wings, it was red. And they were coming door to door, and they wanted to let us know it's very invasive, so here I am. Every time I saw it outside, I'm like, I guess I have to kill it. Like, what am I going to do?
Where do you live, Joy?
Long Island, South Shore, Long Island.
What was it? The Asian longhorn beetle?
It may have been, but does it have wings and red structures? Because when it spread its wings, it was red. I was like, whoa, what is this?
It might. So I've been working with the Asian longhorn beetle, but I didn't see it flying.
Okay.
But it is an invasive species that's in the New York area. It's in Pennsylvania, Ohio. They eliminated it from Chicago, and they're currently working to get rid of it in Charleston, South Carolina. So I was in Charleston. It's a black beetle about this big with white spots, and it destroys maple trees. And the only way to get rid of it is to destroy all the maple trees so they don't have anything to eat, and then quarantine it and try to keep them from getting out of quarantine.
Or get a bunch of reptiles to eat them. Then we're back to snakes. Not a good thing.
Probably not good to play. Let's find the predator, but sometimes that is the only way to do it. I started out early in my career doing invasive species work, mostly on aquatic invasive species, things like Eurasian water milfoil. Some people have heard of that. Hydrilla. There's a whole bunch of ones that will take over lakes, and it's partly because there's nothing that eats them. And the only way they've been able to control those is either somebody goes and handpicks them, or they have a machine that takes them that's mechanical, or they nuke the entire lake with chemicals, and then they start over. Start from scratch. Hopefully they get everything. Sometimes that's successful. Or they've been introducing biological control, where they bring over something from where it's found. And usually it takes years to get approval for this. So I totally understand the process now. It's way better than it was in the 50s and 60s. Little tiny weevils that bore through the plant make it a little less strong. Sometimes it's parasitic wasps. You just hope that it doesn't have a liking for one of our species instead of the species it was brought over to eat.
Right. Then you're back to that. Now you've got to get.
And then it's just taking out whatever the species is we have too.
Right. That's that. When you get rid of, whenever I have infestations, and I call the bug guys, and they come and they get rid of the bugs. I'm like, I walk outside. I'm sorry, birds. I just took your food. I'm sorry, but I really don't want these bugs in my house. And yet you don't realize that, it's a whole it's a biosphere. The birds eat these things.
It's true. So, you mentioned that we should talk about insects. I spend a lot of time with entomologists in the scientific outreach that I do. So about half of the time I'm creating my own content. The other half of the time I'm usually working with entomologists. And I don't know why that is, because I like to work with all biologists, but the entomologists have started to write grants for me, and I work with them. I did a project, two projects that are of interest. One is called Bugs in Your Home. It was a whole series that I did in North Carolina where scientists went around to different people's homes and they looked at all the bugs that were in it and tried to figure out what were common themes. Where was biodiversity high? Where was it low? And it turns out we have a lot of bugs in our home. But most of the time they're not a problem. They're not just cockroaches. It's just a lot of diversity, and they come in through windows and stuff. And the other project I worked on was with mosquito control.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funded work by the CDC because mosquitoes spread a lot of disease. And so there's an interest in trying to control mosquitoes. Now, the CDC, mosquito control doesn't like spraying for mosquitoes. They really don't. But sometimes they have to. And part of the reason for that is if you have an outbreak of dengue fever or malaria or yellow fever, which are all things, or chikungunya, these are the common ones that mosquitoes carry, which can definitely happen anywhere from Florida up through South Carolina, North Carolina. You could have these outbreaks. The only way it gets transmitted is if the mosquito bites somebody and then flies to the next person. So it doesn't spread so much. These diseases don't spread so much in the US because most people live inside in air conditioning and they're not just outside getting bit. But if they find out that there's a bunch of people have yellow fever or dengue in Florida, then they just spray that city, usually in the early morning or in the afternoon when normal insects are not out, so they don't kill everything. And mosquitoes are quite petite animals, so you can use light amount of insecticide and it kills them. You more or less eliminate it. That's why in the US we don't have those problems, whereas they're still really common in lots of parts of Africa and South America and Central America and Asia. But it's not like they weren't here. I mean, they were. That was a huge problem during the early 16, 17, 1800s, all that. It was 1900s. That's why people didn't live in Florida. So,
it's kind of funny. Long Island has poison ivy all over the place.
Okay.
And I'm like, what did the Indians do? Like, did they all walk around? And somebody once told me bear grease. And I'm like, okay, no bears, Long Island. So what did they do?
Well, so I love the idea. Poison ivy, I made a video on poison ivy. It's one of my most popular videos. Yeah, it can be really bad. It's fairly easy to not get poison ivy.
You stay away from it.
Well, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, I made the video called Never Get Poison Ivy Again, which was a little bit of clickbait to try to get people to watch it and figure out, was there a pill or is there an antidote or something where you're not going to get poison ivy? The key is learn how to identify it and don't step in it. But then if you do step in it, if you were a Native American, there's different plants that you can rub on your skin that act a little bit like soap. Jewelweed is one of them that's real common in North America. You just take a little bit of that plant, you rub it on where the poison ivy is, and you just get that oil off. Because the oil, which is a compound called urushiol, is what your body has an allergic reaction to. So it's different than a toxin. You can build resistance to a toxin. So if it was just a poison, then the way to treat it would be to just take little doses of that poison every day until you have a resistance to it. An allergy is a little bit different. Your body mounts an immune response to that allergen. So the more you're exposed to the allergen, the more you have an allergic response to it. And that's why the first few times you get in contact with poison ivy, probably not a problem. But after a while, your body has all of those cells that recognize the poison ivy, the urushiol compound, and can mount a defense. And then it's a mistaken defense. It's attacking the area of your skin when it doesn't need to, but it does it anyway. Mm-hmm. And so that's a problem. Although it is really fascinating that there are researchers from Harvard who are finding that they figured out what the pathway is. And if they would put in money and finances into figuring it out, like if there was an incentive, they could probably find an antidote so that you wouldn't get poison ivy in the future.
But
they stopped most of that research in the 80s.
Yeah. I was a teenager. It was in the 70s. I was a teenager. And when we were kids, we would ride our bicycles. On Long Island, there's an area, Old Westbury, which is part of the Gold Coast and history.
Okay.
Lots of, at that point in time, lots of farms. So took a bicycle stop. There was donkeys, and we fed the donkeys. Oh, let's feed the donkeys. Oh, lots of green stuff. Let's feed the donkeys. They were so sweet, feeding the donkeys. I came home, thought nothing of it. The next day, I broke out of my arms.
Poison ivy.
The next day, head to toe.
Oh my gosh.
And then my eyes disappeared.
It can be really bad.
I had extreme. It was the entire summer.
Really? It lasted for a long time.
The ooze out of my eyes.
Oh my
it got
God.
to the point my mother was like, okay, you're going to the doctor.
Well, I mean, my first recommendation is if people know they've contacted poison ivy, go right to the doctor, because they have things that can help you. There's over the counter stuff like cortisol cream and stuff, which can help dry it up, which is what you want to do. But the doctors can give you steroid shots,
right?
Which will really
That's
help.
what I got.
Yeah, or they can give you steroid pills. I mean, for the short term, that's the ideal solution.
He shot me up, and every year after that, it was April, and it went into May. Bam! I would get poison ivy.
Yeah.
Every year after
because you have all those basically cells in your body that are recognizing it, and instantly
I don't
they
know
get
if
triggered.
It was growing or people were burning it. I really don't know. It finally stopped, got out of college, and I went to college. I wanted to be an archaeologist. So I did a few digs. I went down to Maryland on a dig, and I didn't think at all about anything. There was no poison ivy, but it was probably in the ground, in the roots. So I'm digging, I'm having a good time. And I wake up one morning and I'm like, oh no. By the afternoon, my entire posterior, from my thigh to my ass, one huge blister.
Yeah. Yep.
And they said, we're taking you to the hospital. And I said, no, I'm going home. I got in the car, drove home. My landlady to this day, who's a very close friend of mine at this point, she says, I'll never forget when you came home and you had poison ivy. I was like, yeah, that was kind of scary. She goes, that was disgusting. So when I see poison ivy, I'm like, that's poison ivy, that's poison ivy, that's poison. Let's keep going this way.
Well, it's good that you can recognize it now. I mean, that's all you have to do is just see it. It is problematic, though, like you noted. In the winter, you can be pulling vines, and they they're almost, it's almost worse on the vines in the winter, the oil. You might not know it. And then the other problem is if, say, your dogs run around and get in the poison ivy, and then they come back to you, you can pet them and you get it. So that may be how, I don't know if you had animals, even if you weren't stepping in it, if they were coming back and you were petting them and it's all over, you would get it.
I'm so, I said that there are bugs that bother me. Well, all I have to see is poison ivy. I'm like, okay, got to stay away from it. And when I walk my dogs, I'll see it in neighbors' yards. And if they're outside, I'll be like, you got to take care of that. That's not good.
Yeah.
My next door neighbor had it growing, and I must be a lunatic. Their landscapers came, and I said to the landscapers, didn't even ask the next door neighbor. I said to the landscapers, get rid of that.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, poison ivy. I'm like, yeah, it's growing over my fence. Get rid of that. Very bad. But the thing is, there's sumac. I don't have any problems with sumac or oak. Well, I don't know if I've seen it or not. I just don't have problems.
Poison oak, not as common. Not as common in that area. I may it may cut here with my battery on my cameras.
Oh, really?
Running low. I'm looking at it over there.
You're still, I can still see you, but we can wrap it up.
Well,
we don't want to go dark.
It may, if it will, maybe I can connect again, but sorry. Continue.
I could ask you a zillion questions. I know now that also, maybe we could end on this. So you've been doing some we can end on it. You've been doing some research on mushrooms and
Yes.
psychedelics,
Mm-hmm.
and that's pretty cool stuff.
Yes. Right.
That's from my, that's from my 60s of growing up. I've been there, done that. But it was they were street drugs. They weren't. So you're actually, you're interested in the species and such.
I have been studying them for 20 years, never used them until a few years ago, but followed all the research. And then I've been following lots of people who are using them for therapy. They're tremendously helpful. And I'm not a proponent of drugs per se, but I'm a proponent of mushrooms because I've never seen someone who's able to go through an experience and then come out and say their goals in life are anything but positive. Everyone that comes out says, I want to be a better dad. I want to be a better person. I want to get healthier. I want to stop smoking. I want to stop doing alcohol. I want to stop doing other drugs. I want to reconnect with my parents. I mean, whatever it is, it's always positive. It's difficult to do higher doses of mushrooms. And so the key is, of course, finding a good guide who can take you through it. I mean, I've been lucky to follow along people who are good guides. But yeah, I think it's a tremendous resource for people, and we just have to figure out as a society how to help other people go through the experience. That's my that's my thought. I don't actually think that it's going to be medicalizing it in the same way that we do prescription drugs. That's a lot of the discussion I see is how do we legalize it and medicalize it and prescribe it. It's figuring out as individuals and communities, how do you help your friends go through it? Because you have to be somewhat careful because there are some risks with psychedelics, but I view that as the best way. It's almost free. You could grow it yourself, and if you needed to, it's a tremendous mental health tool, and a lot of people are struggling with mental health, and I don't think the answer is necessarily drugs. It's a whole framework of it's more holistic in nature, but mushrooms allow you to see the holistic approach you need to take. Yeah, it's the community. That's why you do it with friends. It's finding your own sense of purpose, and that can also be done through therapy before and after. It opens up your subconscious. You probably already know what it is, some of the things you need to do, and you filter it out and you say, no, I can do without that. I can do without friends. I can do without hanging out with my parents more. I can do without whatever. You convince yourself of these things, and then the mushrooms tap into your subconscious. That's like, you realize that's all wrong, right? And if it was weird and the conclusions people had were negative and it felt like woo-woo drug talk, I wouldn't be an advocate. But almost everyone comes out with such positive, appearingly very moral solutions to their problems. It seems like a good thing to me.
I sort of agree with you. I don't think if we take Mother Nature out of it, and you could get it at 7-Eleven, you lose what it is.
There's that too. I mean, I love the ceremony of doing things a little more connected to nature, and why not use the mushroom? Like, why not eat the whole mushroom? Why take it in a pill? Like, the mushroom is just as good.
It's just as good.
There's almost no side effects from taking the mushroom instead of
what did they call that? The Native Americans, those the teenage journeys, or when men would become men, or
it's some sort of coming of age ceremony.
Yeah, coming of age things.
They're different ones for different.
We're missing out on those things. I mean, we turn them into parties.
No,
we turn them into gift parties.
People are. I heard people say this before, that kids are inventing their own by going out and getting smashed and hammered and drunk. That's their coming of age type ceremony, because the closest thing we have is a high school graduation, but that's doesn't do a whole lot. I've been able to work with some people lately who are doing a little more ceremony in that regard, and I think it's fascinating. Doing sweat lodges and hunting is a fantastic ceremony thing, although I know a lot of people are anti-killing of animals, which is understandable. Although if you look at the StoneAgeMan approach, we're part of nature, and that's always been something that humans have done. And so there is something quite ceremonial about paying respect back to the animal who's essentially sacrificing itself for you, if you look at it like that.
Right.
People don't think about that. And unless you're vegetarian and you turn that off, they don't even think twice about getting meat at the grocery store. I feel like if you eat meat, you should have to go through the process of killing an animal to see what sacrifice is being made by that animal. That sounds weird to say in some ways because I'm a scientist, but that's how a lot of the practitioners say it when they talk about it. And it a little bit makes sense because that's how indigenous groups would have talked about it too.
Well, it's a very simplistic. What goes around comes around. But I mean, there's a cycle of things, right? And we'll be ash at some point in time, and whatever happens to us spiritually, or our bodies will go back to the earth, back to the mud. So, which I love to play in. So, I don't know. I think that I must have been some sort of, like gypsy or bucolic, person in my past, because I'm just drawn to the earth. Just very, I don't know.
Well, I think, like I talk about the StoneAgeMan view, we had that in our lives so much. And I think if you look back at our evolution, we needed nature way more than we need it now. And we have lost so much of that connection. And I think that's what you're feeling when you feel like, oh, I'm missing something. It's something in nature I'm missing. I mean, it's true, and I don't know how much we need to integrate back. I don't think we have to go back to the Stone Age. I think there are simple hacks like the forest bathing techniques that they do in like Japan. Just getting out in nature a little bit, even gardening, for an hour or so. I think those simulate it enough that it helps trigger the points in our brain that we would need to kind of feel more human. So
my husband loved the beach, right? So, he always needed to be at the beach, be at the water. I'm a mountain person. I'm like, give me a lake and mountains. Give me a mountain, and I'm just in awe of mountains. And, I think these are it's like the call of nature. It's just calling us back to whatever, I don't know, whatever DNA was listening.
Oh, sure. No, I mean, I think you are highlighting something that is very natural, and some people are more attuned to it than others. I think a lot of people, through this filtering system that we have learned to live without it. But maybe somehow they're feeling something's missing. They just don't know what it is. That's why I think mushrooms are really fascinating, because often if you take them, especially if you take them in the wild, your eyes are open to nature and you're like, oh, yeah, this is what it's all supposed to be. And I think that's in many ways a real feeling, that because we've taken away that filtering system where we've learned to live without it. Right. And we're realizing, oh, there it is. It's right there. I need to get back to that. And so I do think after you do a mushroom trip, it's so worthwhile to integrate afterwards and write down all the things that you thought, because you'll go back to normal. You'll go back to your old ways real quick. But if you can start tapping into what were the things that I was thinking, how do I change if I need to, all those kind of things. I mean, I try to do that if I ever do mushroom trips.
I'm not a neuroscientist, and I don't play one on TV, but there's got to be the chemical, right, that is connecting different parts of the brain that are not normally connected. And somehow that ego and id thing are just like, boop, gone. Yeah. And the connection is there, right, because too much information. When I was a teenager and I did LSD, when I tripped, I had a sensation of we are all connected. Right. And it was clear. I saw it, smelt it, and felt it. And to this day, I can still call that back.
Yeah.
I can still call that
back. And I think,
not that I want to trip, but I can call that back and say, yeah, really, we are all connected. We are all connected.
I mean, I think that's part of why it's so helpful for people when they're facing end of life anxiety or crisis is, that's what some of the studies at Johns Hopkins were. If you take mushrooms and then you have less fear, it's because people will feel, oh, everything's connected. This is not the end. So yeah, and how do I know what that actually is? I mean, I don't know, but that is the feeling you get, and I think there's a lot of benefit that you can have from feeling that.
Yeah. I've
It
just
does
got to
seem real when you're in it, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. 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 And like you said, if you write it down, you sort of lose it a little bit. If you write it down, you read it back and go, huh? And you just have enough, you just remember enough that you're like, okay, I get it. But geez, that, that sensation, that, I don't know, intellect, it, it's just, your brain's firing on all its cylinders and you've only got two that you're firing every day. And suddenly you're like, okay, I'm a moron again. I don't get it. I can't remember. Okay. Life as we know it.
Yeah, well, I try to tell people that sometimes I'll help friends go through an experience, and I try to tell them it's not a magic 8 ball. You can't just shake it and then it tells you all the solutions. It's a small glimpse into what you already think. It's tapping into your subconscious, and you need to set aside time afterwards to figure out, why was I thinking that? It's just it's like if you don't pay attention to your dreams. It's like, okay,
Right.
whatever. I had a dream about this, and then you go on with your life. Well, there's probably stuff you could get out of understanding, why am I being chased in every dream that I have every night? Why am I falling off a cliff in every dream? Well, that means something, and you can figure out part of what's happening in your own life and maybe what you need to change. It's like right there in front of you. So it's a tool that you can use if you do it right. But obviously not everyone uses it right, but that's how I
Right.
encourage it to be used.
There are some people, my husband was one of them. He would be like, don't psychoanalyze me.
Right.
And they don't want to do it. Just don't want to do it. There's something deep down that scares the heck out of them. And they're like, I'm not going there. And that's their journey. That's what they got to do. It's, you can't do it for them. You can.
Well, and this is part of how, as a society, we have to figure out, how do we want to teach the next generation to use it? Because right now it's the Wild West. No one knows how to use it, and everyone's trying to invent it on their own. But if you look at indigenous groups, you would do it in ceremony, and you have a guide who's telling you how to do it. Think, sit down like this, think about this before, think about this after. I mean, we don't know tons of how it worked in ancient and traditional groups. We're taking little bits and pieces. I think the things that work best are when you have a really trained guide who encourages that, right? And instead of just saying, here's a bunch of mushrooms, do whatever you want with it, there's
You have a
some
shaman.
protocol, and it's like a time when you set aside to like dwell on yourself. It's not like you just, whoops.
Yeah,
So,
the camera's gone. I was going to say the
but
camera's gone.
I'm still on the audio, so we can wrap up with
Yeah.
that.
What are you doing next? And what can people look forward to seeing you doing?
So I am still going back and forth working with scientists and then developing my own YouTube channel, which is StoneAgeMan on YouTube. And hopefully I'll be able to do StoneAgeMan more permanently. So if people are trying to follow the work that I do, definitely go onto YouTube. We're doing a lot of ethnobotany. We're looking at compounds that are mixed into health drinks like ashwagandha and bacopa and, different types of caffeine. All natural compounds that humans have used for a long time, and I'm just trying to explore the science behind it. And I think it'll be very fun, and it allows me to get out and be very immersive in my filmmaking. So that's where people can find me in the future.
That's one thing I can always attest to you. You make science fun, and that's why, that's the fandom here.
I
You
appreciate
made
that,
science
Joy.
fun.
I appreciate that.
I love science, and whenever there was a show on, and I was like, "Oh, look, it's Rob. Let's watch it, honey." And my husband and I would sit down and watch it together, and it would be cool. And
That's awesome.
that's what I think that's what you want. So I'm telling you, you're successful, at least in my eyes.
Great. Well, that's good. I like to hear that. I work a lot of the time, either I'm on camera and I'm not interacting with anyone that ever sees it, or I'm putting things on YouTube and then I hit the upload button and I still don't interact with anybody other than comments. YouTube's a little better because you can see comments. When it's on TV, you don't ever
Yeah.
interact with anyone, so I have no idea how it's received.
Well, whenever I hit the channel and it's in repeats, I'm like, oh wait, I gotta watch that. I remember that episode. I gotta watch that.
That's awesome.
It was there have been a number of shows in the past. My initial show was Michael Wood's, and that's when I started realizing that television could be more than just a TV show. It could be, a documentary type of a thing. It could be, and it could be a learning thing, but still fun.
That's awesome.
And that's, for me, that's the best kind of TV. The one that's engaging and it can be fun. So when the commercial comes on, you're not just like, what am I watching?
That's awesome. Well, thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thank you.
I know you're doing email and coffee and you're chatting with interesting people, so I appreciate that I was one of the people you reached out to.
Yes, you're very interesting. Thank you very much, Rob.
All right, take care, Joy. Good luck with your pursuits.
You too. Take care.